It looks like we are live. I'd like to thank all of you out there for joining us for this important conversation tonight. I'd also like to thank my guests who will be joining at different times during the conversation. I'll be joined first, as I am currently, by Cameron Baltrum. He's a leader from Students Demand Action. Hi, Cameron.
Hello.
Then I'll have the honor of being joined by Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action. And finally, I'll be joined by Anjum Coffland, a local mom, an Everytown Survivor Fellow, and a good friend of mine. So I just want to introduce by saying that as a mom, a teacher, and someone who's helped welcome over 100 new lives into this world as a birth doula, protecting children is really important to me. I got involved with the local Moms Demand Action group when my friend started it. That group is Kane and Kendall County Moms Demand Action. Following the tragedy that shook all of us in this neighborhood, in this community, and forever changed my friend Anjum's life. We'll hear her story in a little bit. In that group, in Kane and Kendall Moms Demand Action, I served as the interfaith outreach lead and learned a lot about advocacy and collaboration through that experience. I really appreciate Moms Demand Action's commitment to advocating for gun violence prevention through policy and to educating parents and gun owners through their Be Smart program, all while respecting Second Amendment rights. So Cameron, if you'll indulge me for one more second, I want to share a quick story, and I didn't realize how much you have in common with my son previously. But I'd like to share this story because it is part of why I'm running for office. So 2 years ago, when my son was 14, he came downstairs and asked me how to set up a conference call. And as a mom, I thought, okay, that's weird. He's a 14-year-old kid. I later learned that he was working with another fellow student to set up a March for Our Lives group at his school and needed that conference call with leadership at March for Our Lives to get that set up. And while I was incredibly proud of him, it also kind of broke my heart that kids like you and my son are in a position where you are doing this work to protect lives and to encourage safety for kids, all because adults have failed you. And that is part of why I'm running for office, because as much as I admire you guys for doing that work, I don't think kids should have to do that work. Adults should be stepping up and leading in that realm. So thank you for everything that you're doing, Cameron, and thank you to my son, who couldn't be here, but I appreciate what he does as well. You guys give me a lot of hope for our future. So I'd like to ask you a couple questions and get your thoughts about issues right now. So back to school is coming, and it's going to look different for everybody. We talked a little bit before this about our similar experiences with how our schools are approaching back to school. And whatever that might look like, I'm curious what you and other students have on your minds when it comes to issues around gun violence prevention at this time.
Within our schools, I mean, I've talked with this during many of our meetings that we have, either biweekly or weekly, and with gun violence prevention within our own schools and in the age of COVID and returning, we feel that we shouldn't have to fear one or the other. Like, we should be able to have the protections in our schools, whether that's through SROs, although I know those are many very unpopular, but SROs ultimately in certain schools could be very useful. I know in my own personal school, although it's not used often in my school, I think it's great to have somebody there just so that, if a fight does break out, or if somebody comes into our school ultimately with a firearm, that we know that there's somebody at least there for a first responder. And then ultimately fire or police departments are right nearby to come and bring us in. But with the age of COVID-19 and keeping us safe from not only obviously COVID, but then also from an active shooter, we should be able, I feel like within our schools, being able to find the right areas to not only keep, I guess, distanced, at least partially, but then also being safe and, hiding in case of an active shooter is most important. And I think it's one thing that I've thought about bringing up to my school personally about ways that we can see and either fixing that or finding ways that we can incorporate both,
Right.
but haven't had the time to reach out.
So that is something that I had thought about as well. And I think I've seen other moms ask this question. Like, we know what active shooter drills look like. And as a teacher, I've participated in the active shooter drills, and those involve everybody huddling in a corner of the room, which really isn't possible during a pandemic when we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. And that's a question I'm sure the schools are struggling with as well. But ultimately, it's a question we shouldn't have to be asking, how to protect our students and our kids from both of these things. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, and I'll be interested to see what your school's response is to you when you do ask that question of them.
Yes.
I know in the last couple of years, the discussion has come up a couple of times about arming teachers. And there have been various conversations in different communities. I got involved in that discussion in my own community as well. Is that something that your group talks about, and what do those conversations look like?
It is one of our main central things as not only Students Demand Illinois, which I am a leader of, but as Students Demand as a whole, that we honestly, as a group, we just don't feel comfortable with having a firearm in our school. We understand from others, like the way that they see it as keeping us safe in case somebody does come in, and then the teacher has that needed resource in case of an emergency. But ultimately, it adds on to an already what would be an unsafe environment if this hadn't happened. So it's just an added on stress for students who are already stressed out by the fact that they're in a lockdown drill, having to, obviously not in the age of COVID, being huddled in a corner worrying about, is this person going to come into my room? But then also knowing that, oh, my teacher has a firearm might cause ease to some, but to many others, it'll just cause stress. And it's just something that we don't feel is the right way to control these things in any way, shape, or form.
And I would add that as a teacher, I wouldn't want that added stress on myself either, of having to be responsible for that. I would rather focus on teaching and encouraging my students and not having to worry about the safety of that firearm being present. And since the school year is going to look different, another issue that's come up through discussions is that the issue of gun safety in the home, because many students are participating in learning, whether in part or in full. Does Students Demand Action have discussions around gun safety in the home, and do you participate in the Be Smart training that Moms Demand Action does?
Yes. So Be Smart, I've included myself. I haven't led a training, but I've put myself, attended trainings in which they talk about Be Smart. And a statistic that we actually just brought up yesterday in our meeting is currently among children and teens, firearm deaths is the leading cause of death among that age bracket. And when looking at the second leading cause of death, which is motor vehicle accidents, firearm deaths is actually double the second leading cause of, obviously, motor vehicle accidents. So it's very clear that firearms at the moment are really an issue both in the home, in school, in the community. It's a true issue. With Be Smart, it's an easy way that you can, as a student, go to if you have a parent or a grandparent who has a gun, and knowing that, it's locked somewhere, it's locked safe. We know if somebody were to come into the home, and try and rob, or, where it is, or in the case of certain students, we know that guns can be used for suicides, but knowing that it's thankfully, I guess, locked away, knowing that it's the parents know where they are, and the student does too, but knowing that it's not used, it's locked off, the parent has the key, and it's away. But with Be Smart and keeping it just locked away, and everybody knowing where it is, and it's not just on the kitchen table when you come home from the store or something, just knowing that it's safe away and where it should be.
And I believe part of the Be Smart training involves recognizing signs of suicide, which is, I believe, the leading cause of death by handgun. And so recognizing those signs, but also keeping firearms locked away safely, where children don't have access to them, is really critical. So another thing that I wanted to discuss with you is, I know that Students Demand Action is involved in voter outreach voter registration, etc. I know that elections are really important to Students to Me in Action. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing around that?
So with Students in Action in Illinois, and with Students in Action as a whole, it's really social media driven or like online driven and getting people registered to vote. I think I shared the graphic with you probably, and I believe you posted, I remember seeing on your Facebook page, an easy way of registering to vote your teen or anybody who isn't is just texting future either in capital letters or just texting it normally to 64433. They'll give you a link that allows you to register within your state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a quick and easy way. I personally can't register to vote yet, but I did test it to see where the link would, or like where it would go.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a quick and easy process to get you registered to vote. With Illinois, I recently, as new lists of Moms Demand endorsees or like gun sense candidates are coming out, I email those new candidates as well as other ones who haven't responded to emails, seeing if they would share that graphic with us. And thankfully, like Martha Paschke, we've had many state representatives and even congressional candidate Marie Newman share our graphic on how to register to vote in a quick and easy way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great work. I'm actually doing an event with Marie Newman on Sunday, so that'll be exciting to share with her as well. Is there anything else that you would like to share with people who are watching tonight about the work of Students Demand Action, how they might get involved with a group or get one started?
Yeah, so obviously with school, I'm not sure what Students Demand's official, I guess, policy is on starting groups within your own school. But for people who are here, Students Demand Action Illinois is a quick and easy way to come join us. Our next meeting is on August 29th, so it's in 2 weeks from this Saturday. If you go to our Students Demand Action page, like through Google, go to virtual events, you can use the zip code 60490 Bolingbrook, or I believe you can even use Illinois, and it will show you up to the event, and then you can click on it and sign up for those events quick and easily. I usually handle sending you the Zoom link, so I can send you the Zoom link, and then you come and attend our meetings where we'll share our progress on registering new voters in Illinois. More and more ways that we can register voters in Illinois. More opportunities to register voters and such. So we share a lot in those meetings. We usually pick up our full hour that we get. I know in our most recent meeting, we just recently reached 150 people to be registered in Illinois, which is a plus because we had taken a 6-week break where beforehand we were only at 50, and we gladly registered more than 100 plus new voters in Illinois over that 6-week period. So it's great to see our volunteers and our people really turning out and getting people registered to vote in 2020.
Wow, that's really impressive, and I appreciate you guys doing that work. It's so important to get people involved in voting, especially this year. I think it's really important for people to not only get registered to vote, but also to be looking carefully at their ballots and asking questions of those candidates to better understand who it is they're going to be voting for.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you don't get to vote yet, so I think it's even more impressive that you're out there making sure that other people do. And I really appreciate you getting involved and doing that work. That's really awesome. It is a pleasure to meet you. I'm so thankful for you joining us tonight. And I believe our next guest will be joining us here in 1 second. Let me just see if my technology is here. Sorry.
It's all good. Well, as I guess a goodbye, thank you so much for letting me be able to come on and speak about what Students in Action in Illinois and just Students in Action as a whole is doing. So just thank you for letting me join and talk about these issues.
I appreciate that. And I'd like you to stay on just for a little bit, if you don't mind, while I welcome our next guest as soon as she's on here. I know that you, oops, hang on 1 second. I know that you'll be watching further as we go. I see a comment here from one of the people watching that says, "Thank you for your work, Cameron."
Thank you, Steve.
I think
I believe.
there are a lot of I think there are a lot of people who are very grateful for the work that kids like you are doing. And with that, I would like to welcome Shannon Watts to our conversation. Let's see if I got all this lined up. All right, thank you again, Cameron, and welcome, Shannon. I've just wrapped up speaking with Cameron Baltrum here. He's a leader for Students Demand Action in Illinois. We've been talking about some of the issues that are on his and other students' minds as we head back to school, namely active shooter drills, how that might work during COVID, the question of arming teachers, and gun safety in the home, with e-learning being a thing for everybody right now for this school year, whether in part or in whole. So thank you, Cameron, again for sharing with us, and I hope to be a part of positive changes for kids like you if I'm elected. Now I'd like to extend a warm welcome to fellow mom and the founder of Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts, a leader who inspires so many other moms to use their strengths and their voices to advocate for our kids' safety through involvement in the organization, and through that involvement has inspired many to also run for office, myself included. So thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're running.
Thank you. So you heard some of the issues that Cameron and I discussed, but I'd love to hear your advice about how parents can better advocate for their kids' safety with this school year, and with it being a pretty different type of school year too.
Yeah, a real concern that I have is that we've seen this spike in gun sales across the country in March, April, May, June, July. And we know even before that spike in gun sales, about 4.6 million kids lived in homes with unsecured guns. And so I am personally very concerned about the implications of that, given that most school shootings are carried out by students who have easy access to guns in their homes. So it really is important to talk about responsible gun storage, secure gun storage. And we've had a lot of success having what we call Be Smart conversations with local school boards. And we're urging them to pass resolutions that would require storage information to be sent home with families, and that parents and guardians acknowledge and understand the responsibilities they have under the law and the dangers of unsecured firearms, not just school shootings, but also gun suicide and unintentional shootings. And so in the last several years, we have sent those Be Smart materials home now with over 1 million students that live in school districts that have passed these kinds of resolutions. For example, in Los Angeles, where there are about 675,000 students, in San Diego, 124,000, Denver, 94,000. So that's something that everyone can do, is to advocate for those materials to be sent home.
That's a great idea and a great plan. I'd love to see that happen more broadly around the country. I think that I really admire the Be Smart program and how it approaches respecting gun owners from a safety perspective, because that's something that we share. Gun owners and non-gun owners share the desire to keep kids safe, and I think the Be Smart program is amazing in how it shares that value and educates people and keeps kids safer. You touched on my next question as well with your answer. With this rise in gun purchases that we've seen during the pandemic, many who oppose common sense gun reforms have claimed that this ends the discussion in their favor. What would be your response to that claim?
Well, I mean, those are often gun extremists who believe the rhetoric of the gun lobby that they need a gun to protect themselves from, for example, looters. Every high-income country has been dealing with the COVID crisis. Only Americans have easy access to arsenals and ammunition. And as a result, we're now battling two concurrent public health crises, both the coronavirus crisis and the gun violence crisis. Millions of Americans rushed out to purchase firearms in the middle of a global pandemic, thinking they were buying safety somehow. But Research shows that, in fact, they're exposing themselves and their families to higher risks of suicide, homicide, unintentional shootings, intimate partner violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many ways, it's a perfect storm, right? The pandemic has exacerbated the root causes of gun violence in this country. It creates unprecedented challenges for community violence prevention groups.
Mm-hmm.
This is normally the time of year, the summertime, when we see gun violence rise in cities. And so this year is proving not only to be no different, but maybe even worse. We are certainly seeing a significant surge in people's support for background checks during the pandemic, and on legislation that would disarm domestic abusers. About 2/3 of Americans support background checks
Mm-hmm.
and disarming domestic abusers, and actually think the pandemic has made that even more important. And look, these are policies that routinely 85% of Americans, over 85% of Americans support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting, and we don't always feel that the proportions are that way, because I think there can be a vocal minority that speaks up against it. So my next question for you is a little bit longer and more involved. Illinois lawmakers have been weighing measures to strengthen our FOID system, the Firearm Owners Identification System, to provide for multiple reasons. So to provide the resources needed for the retrieval of weapons from those who've lost the privilege of having that FOID card. Also reducing the duration or the length that FOID card is good for, from 10 years to 5 years, requiring background checks on all sales, as well as fingerprinting applicants. So all of these are measures intended to reduce gun violence. My opponent voted against this legislation, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running. His vote against that legislation is. But it did pass the House and was not called up to the Senate because of the pandemic this spring. Hopefully it will come back next spring. I assume it will. But from what you've seen and advocated for around the country, how do you feel this legislation stacks up nationally? And do you think that this is something worth fighting for?
Yeah, it's definitely worth fighting for. I mean, we have seen gun violence in the state of Illinois that occurs because of a break in the FOID system. And so for years, our volunteers have been working to fix this system. It's called the Firearm Owners Identification System, and to ensure stronger background checks on all gun sales. In Aurora, the tragic mass shooting in Aurora, Illinois, where 5 people were shot and killed, 6 others were wounded. It really exposed weaknesses in the FOID system in Illinois, and it showed that it made it too easy for people who might be a threat to themselves or to others to access guns.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a legislation called the Block Illegal Ownership Bill, also known as the BIO Bill, and that would strengthen gun safety laws. It would require a point of sale background check on every gun sale, and it would fix the FOID card process. It would require fingerprinting and firearm renewal, FOID renewal every 5 years. It would ensure everyone who has become a prohibited purchaser in the meantime, so since that 5-year mark, cannot keep their guns or their FOID card. But unfortunately, once again, in Illinois, the legislature adjourned without passing this life-saving legislation. And honestly, that's why we need to elect gun sense champions like you, Martha, because we need more people who are voting the right way on this issue. And we're getting there. But this election is really important to send a strong signal that, if you're a lawmaker and you do the wrong thing, we will have your job. We really have to show that in November.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I appreciate that. That does bring up another question for me, and it came out in a conversation. I've been spending hours calling voters instead of going door to door because of the pandemic. Everything looks different, including campaigning. But I had a conversation today, which is a common conversation in Illinois, and that circles around gun violence in Chicago, and the concern that we're not concerned enough about it. But when we look at the evidence suggests that about 60% of guns involved in that violence in Chicago actually come from other states with weaker gun laws. What do you see being, obviously, if I'm running for state legislature, I can only deal with issues at a state level. What do you see being solutions at a federal level that could address that best?
Yeah, so when I started Moms Demand Action, it was in Indiana. I was just over the border in Zionsville, not too far from the Illinois borderline. And as we know, guns pass state borders as easily as cars do. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is important to go state by state, which we've been doing. We've now passed background checks in 22 states, red flag laws in 19, laws that disarm domestic abusers in 28. And all of that work is important, and we know based on the data that it's life-saving. But until we have these laws at a federal law level, then each American is only as safe as the closest state with the weakest gun laws. So it's really important that in November we elect gun sense candidates like you up and down the ballot, from the presidency, flipping the Senate, holding the House, and continuing to change the makeup of state legislatures. We were able to change 7 state legislatures to a gun sense majority in 2018, and we plan to do that again, keep flipping them this year in 2020.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of work involved in this advocacy. It doesn't seem to end.
It
Get
will
that.
though. It's on the horizon, and it is, any time you get involved in social justice and social issue activism, the system is not built for it to happen overnight, right? It takes several election cycles to get where you need to be. It takes working on this issue electorally, legislatively, culturally,
Mhm.
and building that momentum on the ground and in states. And eventually, much like marriage equality, you point the president and Congress and even the Supreme Court in the right direction. And I
Mhm.
really do think we are on the cusp of having that happen on gun safety.
Yep. And it's a good thing that moms have a lot of endurance.
That's right. You learn that as a mom. There's no giving up.
Yep, absolutely. I have one last question that I would love your input in
Sure.
before I let you go. And it's something that is near and dear to me as a mom and a teacher. So when I was first teaching, I was subbing in a first grade classroom not long after the Sandy Hook shooting, when the active shooter drills were first enacted
Mm.
throughout schools. Um, and everything went perfectly with the drill, but immediately afterwards, a little girl came up to me and she said, "Mrs. Paschke, what should I do if I'm in the bathroom when this happens?" And I had no answer. I was
Mm.
a brand new teacher and a sub, and this was the first time they were doing a drill. And I reached out to the other teachers and said, "Okay, guys, what are we telling these kids? What do they do if they're in the bathroom when this happens?" And the whole thing just seemed crazy to me because the only answer
Hmm.
that we could give this sweet little kid was, "We'll stand up on the toilet and be quiet." And I really think that the message that we're sending to kids with these active shooter drills is probably causing more harm than good. That's
Yep.
my reaction as a mom and a teacher.
Yep.
Having huddled in the corners with the kids and seeing even middle schoolers and how scared they look just doing the drill. I don't see that being a good solution for this. And I
No,
hate to see that that's where we're going with
yep.
this. And I know that there's been some research about the weight of benefit versus harm with these. What's your take on the active shooter drills?
No, you're actually exactly right. So we did a bunch of research on active shooter drills because this is probably the question I get more from any volunteers because a lot of people, particularly women, moms, join our organization because they have sent their kindergartner to school and they've had to essentially rehearse their death in the bathroom of their kindergarten classroom. And I think a lot of moms then sort of realize, wow, we don't have to live this way. Why are we tolerating this?
Mm-hmm.
And we took a while to do the research and to study it. And what we found was that not only are these drills not effective, because there's data shows that they don't necessarily make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
but in fact, they do cause trauma and anxiety, sleeplessness, poor performance in schools,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. The story you told about the child who was worried about what happens if they're in the bathroom. We hear that over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over again in children. And so, if I had it to do all over again, I would not put my kids through these lockdown drills. We should be stopping gun violence before it gets to our schools. And I also always point out that about 77% of the teachers in this country are women, and about 75% of the lawmakers are men. And as they say, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are probably on the menu. And that's why they're allowing our teachers to be made so vulnerable, and they're putting our children at risk. And that's why we need to elect lawmakers like you, who understand the importance of keeping our schools safe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate your time this evening. I'd like to invite Anjum on to join us here as we say goodbye to Shannon.
Thank you.
And thank you again so much, Shannon. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Thank you for inspiring us. And I look forward to working with you further.
I look forward to celebrating with you in November.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Welcome, Anjum. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. I know it's been crazy times with the pandemic. I haven't gotten to see you in person, I think, for a while. So it is really good to see you tonight. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and for everybody who's watching. I just want to say, especially about Anjum, that I really appreciate your courage in sharing your story. It's a story that inspires me to keep working for gun sense reform, to keep advocating for it, and to keep having hard conversations, because nobody should have to go through what you went through. And I appreciate you so much. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Anjum. And I want to say, Anjum's going to share her story with us, and hopefully it will inspire more people watching to get involved in the difficult work of fighting for common sense gun reform in our country and in our state, and also in looking at your ballots carefully and what people value, who you're going to elect this fall. So Anjum, thank you. The floor is yours. I appreciate your courage and bravery in sharing this story.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Shannon, for making me part of this live. I've never done this, so this is new for me. And it's, it's hard to talk about it. I don't think it ever gets easier. And I don't think people understand the way I lost my girls. I didn't know that that day was going to be the last time I was going to see them. And it's actually very sad to hear that we are going through drills in schools and we can't get a hold on this and protect kindergartners. And we shouldn't have to worry about it as a parent. And I can't imagine, my girls would be in college now, and having this conversation with them about this could actually happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to teach them what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. And you hear all these people who's saying, well, the schools are big, the universities are big, colleges are big. Is there a safe place? Is there actually a safe place? I don't know that. And it's so sad to hear what we're doing. As a United States, we have to figure this out, how to protect our kids. Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart to hear all this. And, Cameron is so involved. He's so young. Mm-hmm. I'm proud of him for coming live and talking about sharing. And he's so passionate. And this is another reason I'm involved with Moms Demand Action, is because you guys are passionate about this. And till something as horrible as something like this, what happened with me, happens to people, they can't even begin to understand that this is the last time you're going to see someone you love so much. It could be somebody who, could be a suicide. It could be your child dying, your aunt dying, your mom dying. You never think this is the last day, or you never said goodbyes to them. The hardest thing I have to do every day is I never get a chance to say goodbye to my girls. And not that that's okay in any way, but I just feel like I had so much to talk to them about, so much to tell them, and just I can't remember the last time I told them I love you, and it breaks my heart.
Mhm.
So, um, so some of the things that I'm very passionate about is obviously the FOID card, and I'm glad we're making a difference in that.
Mhm.
5 year is good, and fingerprinting is very important. Criminal background check is important, but in my situation, I don't know if this would have helped
Mhm.
because he was an upstanding citizen. He was never arrested. He didn't have a criminal record. There was nothing you could find negative about him, but emotionally, he was not okay.
Mhm.
And that's very hard to judge by just fingerprinting or, you know, doing a background check on someone. To
Mhm.
me, it's almost sometimes like my husband, if he would have applied for a gun, it's like, I'm going to buy a gun. He went to a local down the street shop and wanted a gun. He had a FOID card. They did a, I think, 2 day background check on him or something, and
Mhm.
he had the gun. So if we could have something in a paperwork or something, I've never filled out a FOID card application. I wish I would. I haven't done it.
Mhm.
But maybe something if it says you're married or something that said, here's a number to my wife phone number. And if you apply for it, make that one phone call. That one phone call could have saved my girls because
Mhm.
I would have known right off the bat, this man who never owned a gun before
Mhm.
once again, and we're going through a divorce. Either he's gonna kill me, either he's gonna kill my girls, or he's gonna do something to himself. It could have been prevented.
Mhm.
And because after what had happened, I um, looked into other countries and how they are, preventing something tragic like this to happen, and the laws and some of the stronger, stricter laws that they have.
Mhm.
And I'm surprised that we can't uh, in those countries you can still get the guns, but you just have to follow very strict law. And I discussed with you with the Japan situation where you have to take an all-day class, pass a written exam, complete a shooting range for accuracy, mental health evaluation.
Mhm.
Yes, you could lie, and my husband could have still said, nope, everything is fine. I
Mhm.
get all that.
Yeah.
uh, you know, Comprehensive background check, and you're only allowed to have a shotgun or a rifle can be purchased, nothing automatic, nothing's major where you can kill, go through a school shooting and kill 30, 40, 50
Right.
innocent students. You cannot do that.
Mhm.
And every 3 years, you have to go through this. Every 3 years, you have to go through this all over again. Uh, it's time consuming,
Right.
takes you away from everything else you're doing.
Mhm.
And maybe it will stop a lot of people from going, you know what, I don't have time for this. I really don't need it in my house. Do I
Mhm.
really? Probably not. But
Yeah.
filling out a form and quick background check, you're okay there. You had few tickets, driving, no, but that's okay. So maybe this would have helped, maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know, but I strongly believe having a one phone call, just
Mhm.
one phone call to the spouse, to a family member,
Mhm.
just to let them know that, this person is purchasing a gun. We just wanted to make sure, um, is, we're just letting you know, no personal questions asked, zero.
Yeah.
That just,
That's interesting, and I haven't heard that idea before. But it is interesting, and I know that your story is different because it's hard to figure out what fell through the cracks in
yeah,
terms of how he was able to get the gun
he purchased
entirely
two.
legally, and so there was nothing really there that could have prevented that um,
Exactly.
from happening. But for folks who don't know your story, who are watching, I don't know if you want to, if you're comfortable
Uh,
going through sharing what happened so that they understand kind of why it makes the difference that he had a FOID card, right? But he didn't own guns.
well, my husband and I, we were married for 28 years, and we were, for irreconcilable differences, we were gonna separate. And obviously, we were both in a very bad place. The kids were upset,
Mm-hmm.
and I had moved out, and within a few weeks of me moving out, he wasn't angry. He was angry all the time. He was drinking all the time. He was abusing antidepressant. He
Mm-hmm.
went to doctors and got more
Mm-hmm.
uh, higher doses because he's like, no, I'm not feeling it, so I need to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on March 10th, he told me to come see him. I haven't seen him in a while, probably like 2 weeks or so. And it's like, come pick up your things. And when I walked in, he seemed fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to go pick up some paperwork. Supposedly, he left it on the table and he told me to turn around. And I did. And I saw him pointing a gun to his head. And I told him, what are you doing? You're going to wake up the girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my response was. Because I was like, you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, girls are already dead. And I can picture his face. I can feel the emotions as I speak
Mm-hmm.
because it was so like, this man couldn't have done this. There's just no way.
Mm-hmm.
And he started moving away from me, and I went behind, ran up to him and kind of caught up to him. And we had few things like, he's like, it's over, it's done, the girls are dead, and I'm gonna go kill myself. And he pointed a gun to my head, and he's like, no, I want you to live and suffer. And point blank, he shot me on my legs. It went through both of my legs, one bullet. I fell to the ground, and he went to the bedroom, he locked the doors, um, and cops got in time, and they were very smart to get me out of there. So I didn't hear him shooting himself. Uh, but I can picture it, and I live it over and over again in my head, and I sit there and go, it was too late for me to help him out in any way, but this is something I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Future, I want to make sure that it cannot be this easy for anybody to, go buy a gun for the first time, not buy just one, but buy two within 2 weeks period.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how come didn't raise any kind of flag going, this man of 40 some years old never purchased a gun before, he's legally purchasing, let's take that one extra step, see what's going on, just make a quick phone call. And living with something like this, I can't even imagine going through drills and things like this in school. It almost feels good to me that kids can stay home. You can protect them a little bit, which is not a right thing to feel,
Yeah.
but it's so
Maybe.
scary. It's scary to think like that.
Right.
I don't want kindergartens going through
Exactly.
a drill that I can't imagine being that age and thinking, am I going to go to school next day and that will be the end of it? Am I going to go to school next day and this is going to be it? Keeping your guns locked up, putting them away. I've
Mm-hmm.
never had a gun. I don't know. I don't know. As a
Right.
as a couple, we never owned a gun till he was alone in the house. So
Mm-hmm.
it breaks my heart that we're doing this now, and this is the whole reason. I'm thankful that you're running. I'm thankful that people who are want to make a difference in big things nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it, and I thank you for doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjum. Thank you for telling your story. I think it's really important for people to hear stories like that so they can see the very real people who suffer the effects of gun violence in our country, and why people like me are passionate about working to change that. And I think you brought up some really interesting points about different places in the world where they handle gun licensing and gun ownership very differently, that still allow people the freedom to own a gun, but maybe put more of the responsibility of that privilege on the gun owner to keep things safe for people. And I think that it's important that we look at examples like that to allow people to have their Second Amendment rights to own a gun, but also to do it in a way that keeps people as safe as possible. So I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing those things that you've learned with me. I think that's all incredibly important and something that I definitely will keep close to my heart, especially if I get elected and get to have a positive impact on things like this that can save people's lives. So thank you, Anjum. Everybody out there, I hope that you're looking carefully at your ballots and asking hard questions and continuing hard conversations, because every life is worth it. Thank you.
You.
Bye.